Do you see the fight forming in Nehemiah's life right here? He opens this book with this moment in time, and he says, this is when my life was changed. This is when life happened to me, and I found myself in the fight. Wrecked by a burden, his back against the rope. So what are we to do when we're on the rope? So I'm going to give you 3 things. I'll just walk through them. The first one, and then we'll keep going. So when you're on the ropes, number 1, we're to define reality. We need to define reality. That's what leaders do. Leaders define reality. They realize what the fight will entail. They don't run from it, they face it. Let me unpack Nehemiah's reality for you for just a moment. First thing I want you to note is that devout Jews prayed for the peace of Jerusalem. They prayed for the peace of Jerusalem. They still do. Praying for the peace of Jerusalem. And we'll see through Nehemiah's prayer life here as we study verses 5 through 11, he's a devout Jew. And when you pray for the peace of Jerusalem, you're to pray for the city. And when we see this in what are called the Psalms of Ascent. And in the Psalms of Ascent, I think Psalm 120 through 135, I think it is. In those Psalms of Ascent, they're to pray these prayers as they go from Jericho to Jerusalem and as the priests go up the steps into the Holy of Holies. Now, Psalm 122 gives us how they prayed for Jerusalem. He says, I was glad when they said to me, let us go to the house of the Lord. Our feet have been standing within your gates, O Jerusalem. Jerusalem, built as a city that is bound firmly together, to which the tribes go up, the tribes of the Lord, as was decreed for Israel, to give thanks to the name of the Lord. Their thrones for judgment were set, the thrones of the house of David. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. May they be secure who love you. Peace be within your walls and security within your towers. So how do you pray this prayer authentically when the walls lie in ruin? It says here that your gates, our feet have been standing within your gates, O Jerusalem. No, at this point in time, they're not, because there are no gates. There were 10 gates made by the cedars of Lebanon, and they've all been burned. And it says, Jerusalem, verse 3, built as a city that is bound firmly together. No, it's not. And I wonder if Nehemiah had prayed that prayer in the past, like, I think the walls are still, I know the temple's there, but I think the walls may still be in ruin. I haven't heard any other news. Maybe he was praying this as they devoutly did. And he found it hard to pray for Jerusalem. Maybe that was the seed that God planted. Jerusalem was not hemmed together, was not built. Its gates were not established. Its walls were torn down. So though the temple's rebuilt, the walls lie in ruins. And the other thing we see is Jerusalem is still being mocked and taunted by her neighbors. Notice Psalm 79, verses 1 and 4. In chapter 2, I unpack verses 1 through 4, but 1 and 4 for the sake of time. O God, the nations have come into your inheritance. They have defied your holy temple. They have laid Jerusalem in ruins. And then verse 4, we have become a taunt to our neighbors, mocked and derided by those around us. This is what the report is when his brother and friends come from the southern city, the southern kingdom of Judah, the city of Jerusalem. Yeah, it's really bad. It's really bad. They're being mocked. Things are in ruin. Another aspect of defining reality, right? He's a cupbearer to the king. To get to Jerusalem, it's a 900-mile, 4-month journey. And it's not a very safe journey. Many criminals along the way. I'm sure he's concerned about if this plan is forming in his heart, the uncertainty of reception. Are they going to receive me? I mean, I've never been there, and they're going to go, who is this guy, and what's he doing here? And then he has to secure the king's permission. You know, he's the cupbearer to the king. And he's trusted, the king trusts him with his life. Trust him with his life because he tastes the king's wine to make sure it's not poisoned. Is the king really going to allow me to leave for what's birthing in my heart? And then if you think about this, as you read his prayer, you'll see it here in a minute. He feels responsible for the sins of all the people. He's weighed down, not just for his sin, but all their sin. And then could he really leave the comforts of Babylon? You know, when our missionaries go out to the other parts of the world to share the gospel, they often leave behind the comforts of Texas, the comforts of Houston. You've been around and noticed our restaurants? Man, we eat good in this town, don't we? Consider the comforts of Babylon. Alan Platt says he would be exchanging the palace for the desert wilderness and his bed for hard ground. All this is probably swirling around in Nehemiah's heart and mind. And what swirls around often binds us up and makes us anxious. The angst is almost palpable as you open Nehemiah chapter 1 and you see what's going on. And defining reality can do this to us when we're wrecked by a God-sized burden. So let me ask you, what's your reality? What burdens you today? What's at the root? What's at the core of the problems that you're walking through? And how do you get a clear picture of what the journey looks like before you?